6 ambassadors, 1 meeting, and a message that Ghana was not allowed to keep more of its own gold. That is where this story begins, not in a war zone, not in a coup, not with soldiers at a presidential gate. It begins in a conference room, with diplomats in suits representing some of the most powerful nations on earth, all delivering the same coordinated warning to a democratically elected African government. Do not raise the royalties on the gold we are extracting from your soil. Think about what that means for a moment. Ghana is not a small, marginal economy with nothing to offer. Ghana is one of the largest gold producers on the entire planet. Its soil contains some of the richest mineral deposits in the world. For generations, that gold has been pulled from the earth in vast quantities, shipped across oceans, refined in foreign facilities, traded on international markets, and converted into enormous profits that have funded corporations, shareholders, and economies thousands of miles from where that gold was actually found. And Ghana? Ghana has been receiving between 3 and 5% in royalties. 3 to 5% on gold that sits inside Ghanaian soil, extracted by companies operating under Ghanaian law, from land that belongs to the Ghanaian state and its people. When the Ghanaian government looked at those numbers and proposed a sliding royalty scale, rising to as much as 12% as gold prices increase, 6 ambassadors reportedly showed up in unified opposition. The United States, China, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, South Africa. 6 countries, representing competing geopolitical interests in virtually every other arena on Earth, managed to find complete alignment on one issue. Ghana should not be paid more for its gold. That coordinated response is the center of this story, because it is not just about royalties. It is about who controls African resources, who profits from them, who gets to decide the terms, and what it means when an African government dares to push back. To understand why this moment carries the weight that it does, you have to understand the architecture of the global mining industry as it operates in Africa, and specifically as it operates in Ghana. Ghana's relationship with gold stretches back centuries. Long before European colonization, the territory known today as Ghana was already famous for its gold. The Ashanti Kingdom accumulated extraordinary wealth through gold trade. The Portuguese, when they arrived on the West African coast in the 15th century, named the region the Gold Coast, a name that stuck through British colonial rule and only changed when Ghana achieved independence in 1957, becoming the first sub-Saharan African country to do so under Kwame Nkrumah. Nkrumah understood something clearly. The most dangerous form of colonialism is not the one enforced by guns. It is the one enforced by economic dependency. He called it neo-colonialism, the condition in which a country is technically independent but structurally controlled by foreign economic interests. He warned that newly independent African nations were vulnerable to having their sovereignty hollowed out not by conquest, but by contracts. Those warnings proved prophetic. Through the latter half of the 20th century, under pressure from international financial institutions, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, Ghana, and many other African nations were pushed toward liberalizing their mining sectors. The logic was seductive. Foreign direct investment would bring capital, technology, employment, and development. Open your doors to multinational corporations, reduce barriers to entry, offer competitive fiscal terms, and watch prosperity follow. Ghana followed that blueprint. It reformed its mining code. It offered attractive terms to foreign investors. It built a regulatory environment that international mining companies described as stable, predictable, and business-friendly. And yes, foreign mining companies arrived. They built operations. They extracted gold. Ghana became one of the top gold producers in Africa and the world. But the prosperity that was supposed to follow the investment, the genuine, broadly shared economic development, remained elusive for too many Ghanaians, particularly for the communities living closest to the mines. The communities near mining zones in Ghana's western region and other mining belts have faced a complex and often painful reality. Land has been acquired, sometimes through processes that communities describe as inadequate or rushed. Water sources have been contaminated. Farmland has been disrupted. and the royalties and taxes that were supposed to compensate for these costs, to fund local infrastructure, to build schools and hospitals and roads. Those revenues were never as large as the rhetoric suggested. Meanwhile, gold prices surged. Over the past 2 decades, gold has undergone a spectacular long-run appreciation in value. In the early 2000s, gold traded at well under $400 per troy ounce. By the mid-2020s, it had surged past $2,000, at points dramatically higher. The mineral sitting under Ghanaian soil became dramatically more valuable in global terms. The royalty rate stayed at 3 to 5%. So as gold prices rose, the gap between what Ghana received and what foreign companies earned did not shrink, it widened. The royalties were calibrated to a different era's prices. The fiscal regime that had been written when gold was worth a fraction of its current value remained largely in place, even as the profits extracted from Ghanaian land multiplied. This is the context that drove the Ghanaian government's proposal for a sliding royalty scale. A sliding scale is a relatively standard concept in resource economics. The idea is that when commodity prices rise significantly, the host country should capture a larger share of the windfall. It is not radical. It is not confiscation. It is not nationalization. It is an adjustment to ensure that when the value of a country's resources increases, the country itself captures a proportionate share of that increase, not just the corporations doing the extracting. Ghana proposed a sliding scale that could reach 12%. Not immediately, not across the board, but in a tiered structure tied to gold price levels. At higher gold prices, royalties would rise. At lower gold prices, they would remain closer to existing rates. By any standard of international resource economics, this is a measured, moderate proposal. Comparable sliding scale systems exist in Australia, Canada, and other major mining jurisdictions. The academic and policy consensus in development economics has broadly moved toward the view that resource-rich developing countries have historically given away too much in their mining contracts, and that updating those terms is both legitimate and necessary. The response from those 6 ambassadors apparently did not engage with that academic or policy context. The response was opposition. And that opposition tells you something more important than any royalty rate ever could. Now here is where the analysis gets genuinely important, because you have to look carefully at who those 6 countries are and what their presence in that meeting reveals. The United States and the United Kingdom are the expected faces of this kind of pressure. Major Western powers with significant financial interests in global mining companies, many of which are listed on Western stock exchanges, backed by Western capital markets, operated by Western executives, and structured through Western financial instruments. Their diplomatic presence, defending corporate interests in extractive industries in Africa, has a long and thoroughly documented history. It is not a conspiracy theory. It is foreign policy as practiced. Canada deserves particular attention, because it is not a country that most people immediately associate with African resource extraction, but it should be. Canada is, by a significant margin, the world's leading home to mining companies operating in Africa. An extraordinary proportion of the mining firms working across the African continent, in gold, diamonds, copper, cobalt, are headquartered in Toronto or Vancouver, listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange, and financed through Canadian capital markets. Canada has faced sustained and serious criticism from civil society organizations, human rights groups, and African governments over the behavior of its mining companies abroad. The presence of a Canadian ambassador in a delegation opposing Ghana's royalty increase is not surprising. It is almost entirely predictable. Australia is another major mining nation, home to large conglomerates with operations across Africa, including in Ghana. Again, a national government defending its corporations' overseas profit margins follows a logic that is not difficult to follow. But China's presence in that delegation deserves particular attention because it complicates a narrative that is sometimes too neatly drawn in African geopolitical discourse. China is frequently positioned and actively positions itself as a partner to Africa that is fundamentally distinct from Western powers, free from the colonial legacy that defines Western engagement with the continent. Chinese officials speak consistently about South-South solidarity, mutual development, non-interference in internal affairs, and respect for sovereignty. And yet, when the Ghanaian government proposed a policy that would require mining companies to pay more for the gold they extract from Ghanaian soil, Chinese diplomats reportedly joined Western ones in a unified front of opposition. This is because China, too, has significant and growing mining interests in Ghana and across Africa. Chinese companies have made enormous investments in African mining sectors over the past 2 decades. When Ghana's royalty question becomes about corporate profit versus sovereign resource revenue, China's economic interests do not automatically align with the African government's position, regardless of the rhetoric of partnership. When the bottom line is on the table, governments follow their corporations. All of them. The presence of South Africa adds yet another layer of complexity. South Africa is an African country. It carries its own history of resource exploitation, a history of devastating violence and dispossession tied explicitly to the mining industry, to gold and diamonds, and the brutal labor systems built around them under apartheid. And yet South African capital is present in Ghana's mining sector. South African mining companies operate there. And the South African government, representing those interests, apparently joined 5 non-African governments in telling Ghana to keep its royalty rates down. This is the kind of moment that strips away comfortable narratives about African solidarity and forces a clear-eyed view of how economic interests operate independently of political identity. The 6 ambassadors were not acting as representatives of competing civilizational blocs. They were acting as representatives of corporate profit. And on that single question, they were perfectly aligned. Ask yourself, when was the last time these 6 countries agreed on anything else? Ghana's response to this pressure has been notably measured. Accra has not pivoted to confrontational rhetoric. There have been no declarations of rupture with international investors, no announcements of mass nationalization, no dramatic expulsions of foreign corporations. Ghana has continued to engage with international partners, to work within existing frameworks, and to present its royalty proposal as a legitimate policy reform rather than a political confrontation. This reflects a strategic reality that Ghana's government cannot ignore. Ghana is a democracy, one of Africa's most stable and institutionally robust democracies. It has held successive peaceful elections, transferred power between political parties, maintained an independent judiciary, and built a reputation for governance that genuinely distinguishes it from many regional neighbors. That reputation is an asset, and Ghana's leadership has been careful not to do anything that might be interpreted as undermining it or signaling an abrupt departure from the investment climate norms that have defined the country's international profile. Ghana also depends significantly on foreign investment, not just in mining, but across multiple sectors. It has used international capital markets to raise development financing. Its economy is integrated into global trade systems in ways that create real vulnerabilities if major investors perceive the country as having shifted to a hostile investment climate. These constraints are not invented by foreign interests. They reflect the genuine structural position that Ghana, like many developing economies, occupies in the global economic order. But the Ghanaian population and Ghanaian civil society has watched this dynamic with growing frustration. The question being asked in communities near the mines, in universities, in activist circles, and increasingly in mainstream political discourse is a simple and powerful one. If Ghana cannot raise its royalty rate from 5% to 12% without triggering coordinated diplomatic pressure from 6 world powers, what does that say about the actual limits of Ghanaian sovereignty? This is not a rhetorical question. It is a structural one, and it connects Ghana's situation directly to a much larger and much more volatile set of developments happening elsewhere on the continent. Several thousand kilometers to the northwest, in Burkina Faso, a different response to the same set of questions has been unfolding. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, who came to power through a military coup in September 2022, has staked his government's identity on a confrontational approach to precisely the resource sovereignty issues that Ghana is navigating diplomatically. Traore has been explicit and theatrical about his critique of the existing order. He has repeatedly invoked the spirit of Thomas Sankara, the revolutionary leader who governed Burkina Faso from 1983 until his assassination in 1987, and who remains one of the most iconic figures in the history of African anti-imperialism. Sankara's critique, which Traore has adopted and amplified, holds that African poverty is not an accident or a failure of development. It is the direct result of a system designed by and for external powers, enforced through debt, trade terms, military presence, and the political co-optation of African elites. Traore has used that framework to justify a series of dramatic ruptures. Burkina Faso has expelled French military forces. It has ordered the departure of French and other Western media organizations. It has pivoted toward Russia, formally inviting security providers aligned with Moscow to provide military training and operations. It has aligned with Mali and Niger in a new political and security bloc, the Alliance of Sahel States, which has explicitly broken with the regional framework of ECOWAS, framing ECOWAS as an institution captured by French and Western interests. On resource sovereignty specifically, Traore has taken steps that are far more aggressive than anything Ghana has proposed. Burkina Faso has moved to renegotiate and in some cases terminate mining agreements to increase state participation in resource revenues, and has framed its gold and other minerals rhetorically and legally as belonging to the Burkinabe people, not to be surrendered to foreign corporations under terms set in a different era. The contrast with Ghana could not be more deliberate. Ghana works within the system. It makes proposals through diplomatic channels. It accepts the legitimacy of the international investment framework, even while pushing against its edges. The Sahel Alliance has declared the system itself illegitimate and is attempting to build outside it. What happens in Burkina Faso over the next several years will carry enormous weight for how this broader question gets answered across the continent. If Traore's approach delivers more resource revenue, stronger local economic development, and eventually greater stability, the model becomes harder to dismiss. If it leads to deeper poverty, worse security, and a new form of external dependency, this time on Russian interests rather than French ones, the cautionary tale will be just as instructive. The answer is not yet written. That is what makes this moment so significant. The Sahel Alliance represents something genuinely new in African geopolitics, even if the underlying grievances it articulates are very old. For the first time in the post-independence era, a group of African states has formally withdrawn from a regional institution, declared a new bloc, and explicitly aligned that bloc with an anti-Western geopolitical posture. This is not just rhetoric. These countries have made concrete policy choices with real strategic consequences. But critics, including many within those countries themselves, raise serious questions that deserve honest engagement. They argue that the junta governments of the Sahel have used the legitimate grievances of resource sovereignty and anti-imperialism to consolidate political power, suppress dissent, and deflect accountability from their own governance failures. They point to worsening security indicators on the ground, to restrictions on press freedom, to the absence of credible timelines for any democratic transition. And they question whether aligning with Russia, which has its own extractive interests in African resources and its own documented record of exploiting conflicts for strategic and commercial gain, actually serves African sovereignty, or simply substitutes one form of external dependency for another. These are serious critiques, and they matter to the broader question of whether resource sovereignty and democratic governance can be built simultaneously, or whether the Sahel approach requires trading one for the other. Ghana's democratic stability does not resolve the question of whether its diplomatic approach will succeed in achieving meaningful economic sovereignty. But it does suggest that the binary between submissive integration and confrontational rupture may not be the only framework available to African governments navigating this terrain. The space in between those poles is where the real strategic work is happening. And it is harder, more complex, and less cinematically compelling than either option. That is exactly why it is so rarely examined clearly. The deeper architecture sustaining this entire dynamic is one that has been built deliberately over decades. The bilateral investment treaties that many African countries signed in the 1990s and 2000s, often as conditions attached to IMF or World Bank lending, or as requirements for accessing foreign capital markets, contain investor-state dispute settlement clauses that allow corporations to sue governments in international arbitration courts outside national legal systems when governments take actions that affect their expected profits. These mechanisms have been used repeatedly to challenge taxation changes, environmental regulations, and licensing decisions across the developing world. The practical effect is to create what scholars call a regulatory chill. Governments become reluctant to change the terms of resource extraction, not because the changes are economically unjustified, but because they fear the legal and diplomatic costs of the challenge that will inevitably follow. Ghana's sliding royalty proposal is a direct test of whether that architecture can be navigated. The six-ambassador response confirms that the chill is operational. When even a moderate, technically defensible royalty adjustment triggers coordinated diplomatic pushback from six world powers, the signal to every other African government considering similar reforms is unmistakable. There is a price for attempting to renegotiate the terms of your own extraction. And yet the political pressure from within Ghana, from citizens who have watched their country's gold fuel foreign fortunes for generations, is also intensifying. Demographics are shifting. A younger, more connected, more economically frustrated generation of Africans is watching how this plays out. They are not impressed by the diplomatic language of investment climate stability when what they see in their communities is land disruption, water contamination, and poverty in the shadow of active gold mines. The tension between those two forces, the international investment architecture pressing down and the domestic political reality pressing up, is not sustainable indefinitely. Something has to give. The only real question is how and when. It is worth situating this debate in the global commodity context that makes it so urgent right now, because timing matters enormously in resource politics. Gold is not simply rising in price. It is rising in strategic importance. In a world of increasing geopolitical fragmentation, where the architecture of dollar-denominated global finance is being questioned by a growing number of major economies, where central banks in China, Russia, India, and across the developing world are actively and aggressively accumulating gold reserves, gold has reasserted its role as a foundational strategic asset, not merely a commodity. This means that the gold sitting beneath Ghanaian soil, beneath the soil of Mali and Burkina Faso and Tanzania and the Democratic Republic of Congo, is not simply a product to be sold. It is leverage. It is strategic depth. It is, in a world where financial systems are under stress and geopolitical alignments are shifting, a form of economic sovereignty that does not require anyone else's permission to hold. The countries that control gold production are not just in the mining business. They are in the business of global financial stability, and they are being paid for that position at 5% of the value of what they produce. Extend this logic to the broader mineral picture, and the stakes become even clearer. Africa holds an estimated 40% of the world's mineral wealth. As the energy transition accelerates globally, driven by electric vehicles, renewable energy infrastructure, battery storage, and the decarbonization of industrial systems, demand for lithium, cobalt, manganese, graphite, and rare earth elements is projected to increase by multiples over the coming decades. Most of the world's accessible deposits of these critical minerals are concentrated in Africa.